What's up, everybody? This is NealReal, and this is the father you didn't have. Wisdom from an elder about relationships and happiness in life. Like, share, and subscribe. Now let's get right into this topic. So why am I attracted to this type of person? So I'm talking about how we develop certain preferences, and this comes from three places. The first one is natural subconscious programming, usually coming from family members and your upbringing. The other is media programming. These are things coming from the media. And then finally, it's about familiarity. Whoever you're around the most, whether negative or positive, begins to create what you are attracted to. So let's start with natural subconscious programming. So when you're born, your opposite sex parent is the first person that becomes a preference for you. This is your mother or your father. And however they look and how they treat you, whether good or bad, determines whether or not that is a person that you will be attracted to in the future. So let's say, as a man, young boy or whatever, your mother is brown skin, straight hair, or she has a fro, or she has locks or braids, or however she presented herself growing up. Her shape of her body. Perhaps you had aunties and a grandmother, and they all had this similar shape, and they were nice to you and warm to you and affectionate to you, and they admired you and they encouraged you. The way those women looked will make up what you find attractive in women your age going forward. So that becomes a preference for you. And so if you're around a bunch of, black women and they're shaped a certain way growing up, that becomes your preference. So if your grandmother had a big behind and your mother did, and your aunties and sisters and everybody who was warm and nice to you looked this way, you get a program started in your subconscious where it says, hey, women that look like this are nice to you. Deal with them more often. And so now you're programmed to be attracted to them because you want to have positive experiences. Okay? So that's how it gets in there. Now, as you grow up and you deal with women your age or girls your age, how they look and how they treat you will determine another preference. And so you'll have a variety of preferences in your subconscious, and that comes from the treatment of women and girls in the opposite sex as you grow up. Okay, and the same for women. So that's how it works. Now, sex also plays a part. So if you have sex with somebody and it's really good, however that person looked, on top of how they treated you, will also, if they treated you really well, will also form a preference in you. So that's how it works. This is how you form preferences for who you're attracted to. The next thing is you constantly seeing depictions of people on TV, in movies and things. So if there's a certain type of woman, in American culture, it was the blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman that was often presented in movies and TV, and even in magazines and stuff like that as the most attractive. They would airbrush her body. They would do things to really showcase her as this beauty that they prop up. That becomes a preference in your subconscious that you find attractive. That's where another one comes from. And so a lot of people have preferences that were just put into their subconscious based off of television and media and stuff like that. Finally, you have familiarity. So perhaps you're around the opposite sex and they had a certain look to them, but maybe they weren't positive, but this is what you were dealing with on a consistent basis. Later on in life, you may have another preference, but yet those particular women you are familiar with because that's who you grew up with around, you may be attracted to them. You may start dealing with them even though that you don't find them that attractive. They're familiar to you because that's what you dealt with growing up. And you see what I'm saying? So this is where all our preferences for who we like come from. So nose shape, skin tone, hair textures, body types, all of that is formed by the opposite sex in our lives since we were babies. And if they were nice to us and they were affectionate and warm and they gave us positive feelings, that tends to be what we are attracted to. And then, of course, the media. If you constantly being bombarded with a certain image in the media, and it's positive, it's always presented as positive and warm and nice, then that becomes a preference of yours. Okay, so I'm gonna give you some personal examples of mine. All right, so I grew up, obviously I had a mother and I had a sister and I had a grandmother and aunties and stuff. They didn't treat me that well. They were mostly neglectful, I would say. They were there for me, but they gave me very little affection. They weren't that warm towards me at all. And so those type of women, while I was familiar with them, they were not my preference. So how they looked, brown skin, black hair, black women, of course, weren't my preference simply because of that. My subconscious did not say, hey, these are some women you should deal with, because they weren't really giving me anything, right? Now, my mother and father, we used to go on date night, and they would leave us with a couple that had a daughter. Now, the couple was a man and a woman, a mother and father, but they had a daughter, and the daughter looked like the mother a little bit, and the mother looked very young. So she would almost seem like she was a sister to the daughter, even though that was her daughter. And those two women would take me and my brother out and hang out with us and kind of babysit us, basically. I mean, we were not babies. We were around, we were preteen, but they would take us out, buy us some pizza. We would watch Star Wars. We would do finger painting or connect the dots. They would play with us, take us to the mall. You might get a toy, maybe not. Ice cream after pizza, Disney movies. They would engage us and just play with us. And then at the end of the day, this would be a Saturday, usually around 8 o'clock or so, they would take us back to our parents' house. Now, before we left, they would pour out a bunch of candy on the bed and say, hey, pick what you want and take this with you. And on the way home, they would, the father and the mother and the daughter would give us a kiss, send us back to the house. Now, the way those women looked became a preference of mine growing up later on in life. The mother was kind of brown skinned, kind of caramel colored, and then the daughter was light skinned. Okay, and so I had a preference for light skinned black women with straight hair because of that. Okay, going forward in life, around my mid-teenage years, I grew up in a cult, by the way, and they called it a congregation, and this was called the Jehovah's Witnesses. So within that, there were, families and different things. So after these sermons or the talks that they would call them, there was fellowship time. You could talk to people, kind of interact with people and stuff like that. And so, the kids would hang out with different kids of different families and stuff like that. And so there's one particular girl, she had light skin and straight dark black hair. Okay. And I found her very attractive. She found me attractive. She was always warm and nice to me. Now, all the other girls in that, they didn't necessarily show that same affection towards me. And some of them were dark skinned, brown skinned. And one in particular was passive aggressive. I remember her slamming my hand in the door of a car one time and just not being that very nice to me. And so guess what? I don't have attraction towards those type of women. She was a dark skinned black woman, a black girl at the time. Her sister was similar in shade and tone, and so, but this lighter skinned black girl with straight hair and slim features, she was very nice to me in affection. So guess what? That became a preference. So now that's in addition to the preferences I already have from the couple that would take us out, the mother and daughter that would take us out when my parents had date night. You see, so my preference in women is being formed by my interactions with women. Okay, so the more positive and the way they look gets stored. So one of my preferences is light-skinned black women. I can immediately see the beauty in dark-skinned women. I don't look at them as ugly or anything like that. I don't have any self-hate or anything like that. But I don't have a strong attraction toward them. They would have to show a lot of affection over time to where I would pursue them and then go forward, and that would probably add a preference to me to where I would want to talk to them. But most likely I see them, I say, okay, she's good looking, and I'll move on. I don't feel any attraction to even want to talk to her, because my subconscious programming, my previous experiences with women that look like that, Like I said, they would do things to harm me. So my programming doesn't allow for me to be attracted to them at that time. I remember later on in life, there was a girl in my church. After I left the cult, I joined the church, pretty much jumping out of the frying pan into the fire. And this girl looked like Pocahontas from the Disney movies, but she was darker. My sister's complexion, long, dark black hair, beautiful. And I tried to date her. I got her number and exchanged numbers and things like that. She turned out to be mean. She turned out to be a woman that wanted me to be exclusive to her. Like, she saw me talking to another woman, sitting with another woman at church or whatever, and made a big thing about it. And I'm like, we're not together. How are you being this way? So her treatment of me now still is fortifying this belief that, hey, this particular type of woman, how she looks, even though she's beautiful, is not what I should be talking to. So when I see women that look like that, I tend not to even talk to them, because I feel like this is what's going to happen. And it's a subconscious thing. It could be the nicest woman, but because of my programming, you see, and this is where this comes from. The treatment of you as a person growing up is how you form your attractions and your preferences. Okay, now here's another preference of mine. Redhead or Irish looking women. So the pale white skin with red hair. Okay, now where did this come from? Well, in elementary, there was an Irish looking girl in my class, and she was always warm towards me, affectionate towards me. None of the other girls really was like that towards me, but she was. We weren't dating, we weren't no girlfriend and boyfriend, we were very young. I had no view of, sexual desire or anything like that. I wasn't on that level. I'm a young boy. But her treatment of me, her smiles towards me, her warmth towards me, stored something in my brain to where Irish looking women with natural red hair and pale white skin is what I find attractive. Now, let me give you an example of a media program. As a young boy growing up, on top of that experience with that Irish girl, my father had the family watch Who Framed Roger Rabbit. There's Roger Rabbit, and then there's his wife, so there's a rabbit, and he's like married to a woman. It's funny as hell, but the woman is very sensual in how she's dressed. She wears this big red dress. She got this little skinny waist, these big breasts, long legs, light skin and red hair. So she's similar looking to the Irish girl that I grew up with. And that look was like, man, that's the first time I seen sensuality on screen, and it did something to me. I didn't know what it was, but it was like, man, I don't know what this is, because my parents we were religious, and so they didn't talk about sex. And so, sexual repression was a thing in my life and in the religion I grew up in. And so there was no discussion about it, but that got seared in my brain as attractive, this cartoon character. And so redhead women, particularly when they have real red hair, not something that they colored, and pale white skin it becomes a preference of mine. So that's where it comes from. So I know where all this stuff comes from. But every other woman, like I said, dark-skinned women like Angela Bassett, I think are extremely attractive. The woman that plays one of the warriors in Black Panther, both of them, Lupita, the other chick, one of the warriors, I can't think of her name right now. I follow her on Instagram. She is fine as hell. But yet, at the same time, there's, like I said, there's this thing in me, it's like, well, you ain't getting with that, because it's a program. But yet I can recognize the beauty, okay? So this is just programming. And any of this, all these programs can be changed. So if I had a woman that looked like the women I just mentioned, and they were very warm and affectionate towards me and showed a lot of interest, and we had a sexual relationship, we interacted with each other, and this was very affectionate and warm, that will become another preference of mine, where now I start to look at women that look like her and say, I want to talk to her, I want to get with her. You see, that's how it works. Nobody's really ugly. It's just people who are far from your preference. I want to say that again. Nobody's ugly. It's just people who are far from your preference. So if you're into light skin and thin noses and flat lips, something that is the exact opposite, which is dark skin, wide nose, and full lips, you may be looking at that like that's ugly, but that's not, because the people that look like that are having sex with each other and they don't have a problem with it. So there's nobody ugly. It's just that you have a program running based off of how you were brought up, and that's what's moving you to what you prefer, and you can break that preference. If you decide one day you just want to change your preferences, you're going to let somebody come into your life that's different from what you're usually attracted to. You could definitely change your preference. Most black women have just talked about how all they really want is black men. They love the dark skin and all that stuff. But then they say, hey, what about this Asian guy? Some of them become into Asian men because of something happened. They either watched a lot of movies with Asian men in there, and they were presented in a way that was sexually attractive, and they started to like them and say, you know what, I'm open to dating this Asian man because of that. You see? So it's all preferences based off of programming and how you were treated growing up. Also media, of course. Like I said, I got into redheads because of a cartoon, but also a real life girl that was nice to me, which was, had an Irish look to her. That's where they come from. Now, unfortunately for me, I didn't marry my preference. I didn't marry a redhead, white girl, and I didn't marry a light-skinned black woman. I married a woman that kind of resembled the women that I grew up with that were mistreating me. And that came from familiarity. Because, watch this, I was not allowed to pursue a relationship with the particular girl I mentioned in my cult because my dad didn't want me to have sex with her. So he cut that off, basically, had me tear up her number and all that stuff. But I really was feeling that chick. I thought that there was something there. I was young, I didn't know anything, but I knew that, hey, out of all the women in here, all the girls rather in here, this girl's real nice to me. She's affectionate. She got my back. She's showing a lot of support, emotional support, affection, admiration, all kind of stuff. So she's doing what she's supposed to do, and this is working for me. And of course, she looks similar to those two women I talked about that would take us and babysit us on date night with my parents. Were away on date night. So anyway, I didn't end up marrying my preference. I married a woman that was similar looking to my mother and some of the women that I particularly didn't like growing up. They looked like them. And why did that happen? Well, that's more of on a psychological level where that's what I was around the most. So I was almost barred from really being around the women I wanted, and unfortunately allowed to be around women that were not positive. So my dad would stop me from being with the girl that really liked me. He cut that off, but allowed me to hang out at the house. Me and my brother would hang out at the house of the three girls that we would that went to the same church or the cult that we were in. And these girls weren't particularly positive towards me. But I'm spending more time with them than the women or the girls that I would rather be with. So anyway, that became something familiar, and then I ended up just marrying a woman similar to that, who in turn was not that affectionate towards me, did not show a lot of liking and emotional support and things of that nature. So unfortunately that happens, and in psychology they call it looking to get closure for things you didn't get from your mother. And so I'm going off topic a little bit, but it's actually in topic because we are sometimes in relationship with people who we want to get closure from because they seem like they're your mother. Unconsciously, you want that affection that your mother is supposed to give you, didn't get it. You marry somebody similar to your mother thinking that you're going to get it, and you don't. That's usually what happens. They're just like your mother, so they're not going to give you the same thing that your mother didn't give you. They're just not going to do it. So, that's what I learned about how we are attracted to people. Once again, it's how you're treated. If you're treated well by certain people and how they look, that's what gets stored in your subconscious. Also media programming, and then finally familiarity. So once I was able to understand this and really, get rid of some of that programming about needing, closure from a parent, Now I can go after the women that I want, that I prefer, rather than accept and deal with women that I don't really like. And so this is what you can do for yourself. Look at who you prefer. Look at how they treated you growing up. People that look like that. Once again, I want to keep stressing, nobody's ugly. I hate when people use that word ugly. It's just a person that's far from your preference. Some people do not like how white people look. Look at their pale skin and them little flat lips and they thin nose and that flimsy hair. I don't like that. No, you grew up around a lot of positive experiences with black women. Curvaceous, dark, shiny, colorful skin, full lips, wide noses, dark straight locks and fros and big hair. That's why. Ain't nothing wrong with the white woman. There's nothing wrong with her. It's just you have a preference towards what you like. And that's okay. But let's stop calling people ugly. Let's stop doing that, because that ain't true. Okay, everybody. And it's like I said, for ladies, it's the same thing. So that's all I got for you today. This is the origin of how you're attracted to people. Hopefully that helps you to determine why you're attracted to certain people. Thanks for listening to the end. I appreciate you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. You can email me at neal@nealreal.com. You can also go to my website, nealreal.com. I encourage you to check out NealReal.com. That's NealReal.com. Or you can email me at neal@nealreal.com. Have a blessed day.